Yo, yo, it's the RedBlue podcast crew. Reviewing flicks, both old and new. Red and blue, not political. Nah, man, chill. It was Marvel versus DC till we lost that thrill. Don't stress the episode, don't ask the season. We double up franchises, don't ask for a reason. Moti's got rules that nobody gets. His takes on movies, they're wild as it gets. He's got Super Bowl Mac and Gray by his side, trying to keep it sane while they're in for the ride. Moti's measures are out of control, but in the end he's got the final role. Yeah, that blue podcast, come check the scene. Movies old and new, know what I mean?
I am Multi-Topic Talk. I bring you I Saw the TV Glow review with a panel. This is the after show of the Red Blue podcast. That movie wasn't chosen to be part of the main event. That's why we have this current segment, this current video. I hope you will all enjoy trans identity stuff and entertainment.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm a little baffled as to all the praise that this movie is getting, but yeah, I'm interested to hear your experience with it.
Hell yeah! I'm excited to share mine. What about you, Super Bold? How are you today?
I'm good, and I'm equally baffled about the praise this movie's getting.
It's so sad. That movie's great. So I guess
That's an opinion.
we already segue into the topic. So I chose that movie because at first we paired stuff together and or I should say I paired stuff together, and I was like, what's a movie about growing up? And we got If, and we got I Saw the TV Glow, and I Saw the TV Glow is there. We go. It's here. It's right now. Um, I chose I Saw the TV Glow because I heard good things about it, and I was curious to see it if it held up. And people from the Joker's Corner, they were like, "Oh, you should watch that." Like when it came out, but I'm always way too late on stuff. That's why my Penguin and my Agatha reviews are not out yet. But hey, things happen. Eventually, I will be caught up to everything. So I heard really good things about it, and because I didn't hear a bad word on the movie, I was like, you know what, I will watch it and I will see. And I liked it. It when I did see the movie, I didn't see as many movies as I did now from 2024. I think at that point I had seen like around 50-ish movies, and that one it was in my top 10. Now it got like pushed down because a lot of great movies came out since then, but I like that movie. So it's a bit unfortunate guys didn't like it as much as me. Um, we will see why. We will see why once that's you guys' turn. But I will admit, how I think I missed a lot of things because this movie has a lot to offer, and I'm excited to rewatch it eventually to catch on everything. And apparently, there's a lot of like Buffy the Vampire reference, if we can call it that
That's
way.
the thing that pisses me off the most. Everyone keeps saying that, but man, everything that they show from the Pink Opaque does not look like it's on the same level as Buffy. If you're going to say like, are you afraid of the dark or like Goosebumps or something like that or Power Rangers, it's like, yeah, okay. But Buffy was on a whole different plane than everything that they're showing with this.
Okay, well, I haven't seen Buffy. I've heard about Buffy times and times, but I've never seen that thing. I know roughly the idea. It's like the what inspired Smallville in some ways. So I have an idea of what Buffy may be like. Now, I think there's a lot of showing, and I enjoy that. Show don't tell. It was well shown. I rewind. It was well shown how time stopped when the lead screamed he was dying. That's near the end of the movie based on
Okay.
placement of my notes.
So what about the 10 minutes straight where the second lead is just giving exposition dumps directly to the camera, and there is no show. It is just tell. I feel like you're selectively grabbing one scene and you're like, hey, they actually showed this, but there's like the main like dialogue, the main dump of information comes while they're at the bar or whatever, just after two bands have played, and then it's all just tell, no show.
Well, I was hooked. What can I say? What can I say? I was hooked. When I'm hooked, I'm hooked. I didn't notice it, but yeah, valid point. Um, I think the way they depict growing up in the movie is to follow the main character through his life as he grows up. And there's another way they frame it is at some point he has a statement like, "Oh, this doesn't seem as scary as it was when they referred to the TV show." And when you grow up, sometimes you're less scared of stuff you used to be scared of when you were a child. So that's clever, I think. Maybe I tried too much to like uh, stand by this movie. I did enjoy a lot. I don't know. Um, Another thing is the main character was well shown to be a liar as he told his mom to drop him off elsewhere than John's place. That was really early in the movie, and I think there were nice parallels between the parents of both main characters. One of the two characters as overly strict parents, the other as shit parents that don't care. It's kind of interesting how like there's two extremes there, and it's sad. Um, well shown how the main character may not feel what other feels, and I think that may enter in the trans identity stuff I did aired a lot about. I didn't see it because again I feel like I missed parts of the movie, but I don't know. Any
You didn't get that part? Like it feels to me like it's just like shoving it like it, maybe I'm wrong. It felt very ham-handed to me. But
I didn't see it. Um, I, I I again I think I missed parts of the movie. So the trans identity. Can you expand on how you feel it's ham-fisted? Because I'm curious here about that.
yeah, it just feels like it's ramming that message down your throat. Where I think there could be a way to get the same thing. I mean, there's a very universal feeling of not living up to like your true self or not being true to yourself. I feel like there's a way that that could be a very universal message that could come across to even somebody who's, you know, not in agreements on the whole the trans issue, if you will. And you could show this whole universal way of kind of bringing people together. Instead, the way that this is kind of doing that message, it feels like it is alienating to a bunch of people. And then the way that I've seen people interpret like negative reviews on this is just saying like, yeah, that's because you're a homophobe. That's because you just are transphobic and you hate things that you know, challenge you, as opposed to like, no, I just don't think that. So the trans allegory is all over this, but essentially, if you take that giant diatribe, the exposition dump that the Maddie gives in that bar, she's saying this real world, this is not the real world. This is under the spell of Mr. Now I can't remember his name, Mr. Melancholy. And this is all fake. What was real is the pink opaque. That's who we really are. And if you notice when it shows the flashes of that, it has Justice Smith Owen in a pink dress that whole time. That's the real self, but what he's living now is not. What he's living now is the delusion that's caused by Mr. Melancholy. To me, I guess you could interpret that some other way, but that just seems to me like it is, you know, trans. It's saying like the real you is that, like when you're actually the character of Tara, or not Tara. What was the other one? Isabel. Excuse me.
And another thing that supports the trans identity thing, but when I was watching it, I more felt like it was more of a LGBTQ plus thing than a trans thing. Is at some point, they question the main character and they tell him, isn't that show meant for girls? Usually, I forgot how they really framed it, but they basically said usually it's girls that like it. Why do you like that? So at
So
first I
he's
thought,
like 17 or something. He has his head on his mom's lap in the back of the car and is like, "Hey, can I stay up late to watch this show?" She says, "What time is it?" He says, "It's on at 10:30." And then she says, "I don't know. You'd have to ask your father," who happens to be Fred Durst, who's sitting in the front seat, and he just says, "Isn't that show for girls?" And then it just kind of cuts after that.
yeah,
So that's the other thing that definitely points to that. And then there is his form of possible conversion therapy or torture that it shows later in a flash as well. So I don't know. There's a lot of things that kind of go towards that, but I do believe the only line that Fred Durst says in this whole thing is, "Isn't that a girls' show?"
yeah. Like when they said that line, I should say. I don't know. Like I'm so distracted tonight. I don't know why, but when I heard that line, I was like, oh, maybe that's like some kind of gay, because maybe he's like, oh, my son is gay because he likes woman stuff. But after hearing all about the trans identity things, I was like, oh, maybe that's one of the seeds they planted. So I thought that was interesting, and I think it adds rewatch value. Now, the next thing I gotta say is I might be wrong, but some of the message of the movie is not to be scared to grow up or change. But again, I think maybe I might be wrong. Am I wrong on that?
Um, I got the exact opposite from the ending, but it is kind of open a bit to interpretation as to why he suddenly apologizes to everybody. Because if it's that, be true to yourself, then why the hell does he end it with apologizing?
Interesting. Super Bowl. Any thoughts on that?
I'll be quite honest. The whole trans allegory completely went over my head. I did recognize maybe some allegories to LGBTQ, more towards more like homosexuality, or maybe elements of toxic masculinity in it, especially like when Fred Durst says, "Oh, isn't that show for girls?" That kind of thing. The trans thing, honestly, until you guys mentioned it, it really went over my head. I didn't pick up on that at all. Now that you mentioned it, I do see it, and I kind of do agree with Gray that it's sort of they kind of hit you over the head with it. It's not very subtle at all, and I don't think it's very well executed.
Okay, well, thank you a lot for sharing on that. So, I'm crazy. Yeah, that's nothing new. I'm always crazy. I might be wrong on that, but I think they wanted to tell us that Maddie lived a fantasy and didn't want to grow up when the main character didn't embrace growing up. Any thoughts on that?
That's what you got out of it? Because
Yeah.
supposedly Maddie,
She was still stuck in the past, and he was like, I want to move on.
I got none of that. So what I got was that she knew that this world is Mr. Melancholy's world, and that's why there's a bunch of different clues. Almost everything in the real world that they're in has like these elements of like, for instance, the last few scenes when they're in the arcade thing or the fun center that he works at, almost every one of the machines that it shows has something to do with either melancholy or I'm forgetting the name of his twin villains of the week. I think it's Marco and Polo. Almost everything in there has like some sort of branding of one of those things. So it's supposed to imply that this is actually Mr. Melancholy's world that they're in. What they're living in is this dream. They have taken the Luna juice and are in this grave. But somehow Maddie was able to actually break out of this and live in the real world, to live in the pink opaque, which is real, where this is fake. What it's showing us is not the real world. It's showing us the fantasy. So I don't know. I got the exact opposite interpretation. So I went through the last few days and listened to a whole bunch of Jane Schoenbrun's kind of explanation. So this was the darling of Sundance Film Festival this year. and they kept giving them like a whole bunch of different panels and stuff and ways to kind of explain this. So I feel like I've heard her explanation of what this is supposed to be. And it's supposed to all lead up to that moment at the end. So after he freaks out and then is alone in the bathroom with the box cutter, this entire movie is supposed to represent that one moment where you realize and that you are true to yourself. And apparently that is that moment. That's where he sees that static inside of himself. So the way that she was writing this is it's supposed to be the trans allegory. That is the one moment where you realize you're actually true to yourself. So I don't know. I feel like it gives a very depressing and mixed message. Like Maddie has somebody bury her alive, but again, you don't see any of this. You're just get this exposition dump from her and just explain that's the way that you get to the real world. I don't know. I think that could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but I don't see that as her. So I get kind of what you're saying. There is this whole nostalgia thing that's in there. But I don't think it's that she wants to remain, like young in her youth and she just wants to stay in this nostalgia. I think what Jane was trying to do with this was show you that she is actually correct and she's living in the real world. Perhaps she went out there and was willing to admit who she was, where he's not willing to be truthful. So she is living in the real world where he's living in a fantasy.
That's interesting. So I won't argue that much with you because you've seen more stuff and you seem to understand the movie better than me. But I still
don't know
like
that I
my
do.
take.
I'm not disagreeing with it, and that's the thing. Like everything is subjective and it's open to interpretation, and it is what you get out of it. The author may have an intent on it, but it's not saying that they actually executed on that. So it is what you're getting out of it. I think it was intended differently from what I'm understanding from what Jane was saying.
Okay, well, interesting. Super Bowl, any thoughts on that? Nostalgia, is that really something in the movie?
That's not what the impression I got. Even before I realized this is more of a trans allegory, the impression I got is that Maddie went out and lived in, when she started talking about this, the Prinko pig is the real world. Well, she's someone who's being true to herself. Not trans, I didn't pick up on that, but she did mention early in the movie that she was a lesbian, so that I think that meant that she went out and lived out in the open with her sexuality. I don't think it was more that they wanted to live in the past and live in, simpler times or safer times or things like that. That's not the impression I got.
Okay, well, maybe I'm crazy. Again, that's interesting. I like that discussion. I think it's one of my favorite discussion we had.
Yeah, but with this
show.
movie, I don't think anything is very straightforward or clear. So, I think there's a lot of different ways to interpret it. And I'm not saying my interpretation is the correct one either. It's all subjective.
Yeah. So before I move on with my likes, there's another thing that's interesting to share. The way people describe an acid trip, well, maybe sometimes the movie feel like that's that rewind. People describe acid trip, this movie feel like one. I think that's the best way to put it. Sometimes with the visual, like, oh, colors, shining colors, the TV glow.
Not that I've ever had an acid trip.
Me neither, but
not that I've ever had one.
I know people who do.
But at least in my experience, that's not what it was. But I think everybody's experiences with that would be different.
Yeah, if I had experiences, it would have been different than that.
I gotta say the movie was very entertaining. And surprisingly enough, the kid actors were good. Sometimes in movies and TV shows, the kid actors, it's like the weak part, and they rely heavily on the adults. But I feel like they didn't ask too much of the kids. The kid were not really groundbreaking either, but they were not like breaking.
Who are you
the
calling
immersion.
kids? Are you
Well,
calling young Owen or are you talking regular Owen? Because regular Owen Justice Smith is like 29, and I think Bridget Lundy Payne is also like 28 or 29.
they're adults. Oh damn.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's surprising. I thought they were kids. Oh, that's
That's
why the
probably why they
acting
were
wasn't
cast,
that
because
bad.
they do look quite young for their age.
So I guess I'm sorry to call adult kids. Um, that's that's interesting. I didn't know that. Um, they did great job at making the TV different from reality with the coloring. I think um, the main character perspective on love was interesting and felt real. The Maddie character believing reality was the TV show was cool. Um, and again, I like that movie, and even now that I've seen a lot more movies than when I did see that thing, um, it's still very high. Nonetheless, it's lower, but it's still very high. And now I guess I will let someone else speak because I did speak in length. Super Bald, what did you think of I Saw the TV Glow?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this movie. Now that I know about the trans allegory, it does open my eyes a bit to what they were trying to do. But um, that being said, I didn't hate the movie. I just think, but I didn't. I thought it was okay. Um, the parts that were set in the '90s, I thought were well done. They really sold it to me. It really felt like it was the '90s. The TV show, the scenes that we saw of the Pinko Pig really did remind me of things that were filmed in the '90s. Shows like Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, that kind of stuff. Um, uh, One thing I did not like about this movie, though, is but they're hardly the only movie that has this issue. But the dialogue was incredibly low, and the music was incredibly high, and I hate that. I absolutely hate that. But it seemed to be especially egregious in this one. Um, I related to the character of Alwyn a bit, or even a bit to Maddie, but not as much, just because I grew up. I was a teenager in the '90s, and I was also an awkward teenager. Um, uh, one of my best friends from back then, who's still a really close friend of mine, we kind of bonded over a TV show as well. We were both big Star Trek nerds, so I can kind of get that as well. Um, Things like trading tapes. We used to do that. We'd tape stuff and we'd trade tapes. As I said, the whole trans thing kind of went over my head. I thought it was more an allegory for homosexuality. Um, and also, I thought a lot of the reality bending stuff at the end was more a clumsy attempt to be kind of like Twin Peaks or David Lynch, because he was big in the '90s, and that was kind of my interpretation of that. Um, I don't do well with that kind of stuff. I don't. Those kinds of things, I don't really pick up on them very well, which is why I've never been a huge fan of David Lynch. Um, so probably a lot of messages or a lot of stuff in this movie just went over my head. Um, Cinematography was good in this movie. Unlike a lot of movies filmed today, the color palette in this movie I thought was good, and they were really good. They used it effectively for setting tone, especially the later scenes when Owen is older and he's kind of like living like this, living on autopilot, living this dismal life. Everything's sort of bleak and gray. I thought that was really well done. No blue tint at all, except for scenes set in the morning, but that's normal. That film has been doing that since forever. It's shorthand to let you know that it's early in the morning, and also harkens back to an old technique that they used to use called day for night, where they would tint something blue to make it look like it was the night, instead of actually filming in the dark. Um, yeah, that's all I have to say about it. Like I said, I had mixed feelings about this movie, and I was quite confused when it ended, to be honest.
I think everyone was. I think that kind of
Which is
movie.
why one of the reasons that I didn't like it as much. Like, as I said, I'm not a fan of David Lynch and these kinds of movies. I just don't do well with that kind of like sort of weird allegories and things like that. I'm someone who's I've never had an official diagnosis, but I'm pretty sure I'm on the spectrum, so I don't do a whole lot with that kind of stuff. I don't do very well with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you. I feel like a lot of people like would need more than one watch to get everything, and myself
Probably,
included.
probably this is.
I
I think this is. I wouldn't be averse to watching it again. I think this is a movie, regardless if you liked it or not, might be worth a second watch to maybe try to see if you pick up on other stuff that you didn't pick on previously.
yeah, great.
Yeah.
What did you think of I Saw the TV Glow?
I enjoyed it less the second time I saw it, so I might be in a different camp than you guys. But I did listen to a whole bunch of interviews with Jane Schoenbraun, and I think I understand what she was trying to do with it. And yes, there is a bunch of it that's intentionally Lynchian, as you're saying. Like she was trying to kind of recreate that whole Twin Peaks thing and some of his other things. She wanted this to have kind of a dreamlike quality because they are supposed to be under the Luna juice or whatever. So you are kind of in this, dreamlike state. They say that time passes differently in this state. And then, they're having all these weird time jumps. I guess that's where I would start with it. Well, I guess let me start with it. How I was introduced to this. I was told, hey, there's this really good horror movie that you're going to love. First off, I don't think this is a horror movie at all.
Me neither.
This is a drama. This is a coming of age thing. Like, if this is a horror movie, then I'm sorry. Like, every coming of age movie is also a horror movie. It's in that same vein, like it's always tough to like forge the path that is to, your future or whatever. Maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't see this as a horror movie in any which way. So maybe that's why I was kind of, I was told this is an A24 art house horror. And it's like, okay, if you just told me like it was an A24 like art house coming of age, it's like, okay, I probably would have been in a completely different mindset on this. So maybe I felt a little slighted that I was told it was horror, and then I don't think any part of this is horror. But I'm left with just a ton of questions, and man, the pacing on this, it feels like it's such a trudge.
Yeah, it's one thing I forgot to mention. The pacing is just I was quite bored. And there was even a couple of times that I actually fast forwarded by 10, 20 seconds, and they were still right where they were.
I wanted to. I didn't, because I wanted to experience it for real.
I only did it because I was pressed for time, but I don't regret doing it because I don't think I missed anything.
I don't think you did either. Some would argue that you did, that you missed that time to let it breathe. So part of that is due to the direction of this. They're supposed to be under the effect of the Luna juice. They're supposed to have been, their hearts taken out and buried alive or whatever. So they're both super monotone. They're both super dull delivery, and it just, man, it gets both of the leads, Justice Smith as Owen and Bridget Lundy Payne as Maddie, and it just, to me, that just makes it trudge so much slower. The fun parts of this are when it shows the pink opaque, and I wish it showed so much more of that, because that seemed interesting. But then we keep coming back to Justice Smith just doing that monotone, raspy, super low, whatever voice until he's like in his, what would that be, like 50? No, 40s, because I think it's 2 years, then 2 years, then
I think he would be roughly in about his early to mid 40s by the end of the movie.
Yes, something like that. But for some reason, at the end, his voice is super high pitched. Like the rest of the time, it was all low and monotone. But then at the end, it's like super high pitched. I don't quite understand it. I get that they were going for something with this, but man, it made it so uninteresting to follow for me. But yeah, I'm just kind of left with a ton of questions at the end of this. Not the least of which is, why are we doing these time jump things? So they use this actor Ian Foreman to play young Owen, and then 2 years later they have Justice Smith play Owen, but they're still using the same actress to play Maddie, and then they do a 2-year time jump, and then I think it's another 4-year time jump, and then the 20-year time jump or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the years are in the 4 time jumps that we get, but man, I don't understand why we had this other actor just for this one little part, and then we're gonna go the next like 40 something years with, or whatever, 30 something years with Justice. But I guess part of that is supposed to be the dreamlike thing. They even have a line in there that they say time moves differently in it's not the void. I forget what exactly they call it, but Mr. Melancholy's thing. So yeah, I guess I don't quite understand the time jumps, other than it's supposed to be dreamlike, and it's supposed to be, it's not supposed to make sense, and that makes it more Lynchian in some way. So first off, the high school is named Void High School, or VHS. I mean, come on. Like, I know everything is supposed to be kind of related to Mr. Melancholy, and it's supposed to keep giving off little bits.
I didn't notice
and
that,
pieces.
but that's kind of a clumsy clue there.
Yeah, and then so
it's
can I
not
ask you
very
guys,
clever.
how many episodes do you think they watched together? So he watched the one with her, and then it seemed like she was giving him tapes, and they didn't really talk, and then they have that conversation on the bleacher. But
I think they've seen more than one, because he went to sleep at her place more than one time, I think.
yes, so
And there are hints later
she started
on.
giving him the tapes in the dark room, and then he talked to her, I believe, on the bleachers, and is like, okay, so do you still hang out with that one girl? And she's like, I haven't talked to her for like a year. And then kind of keeps going, and then he has another sleepover, and she says that she is going to go ahead and run away and wants him to come with. Do you think it's just the 2 times, or do you think there's multiple times? Like, that's
Multiple.
a little unclear.
I'm
How many times do you think then?
To be honest, I have no clue how many times, but I know it's more than just 2 times. But I wouldn't know exactly how many times, sadly. But I know it's more than just 2 times.
What do you take Justice Smith's head being sucked into the TV to mean? You know that scene where he's like kind of being eaten by the TV or whatever. Fred Durst runs downstairs to the basement where he lives and pulls him out of the TV, and then apparently has his head underwater and maybe torturing him. What do you think that pulling his head out of the TV means?
That's one of the few things I missed. I had no idea what was going on there. I was watching it, I was like, right. Oh, that's cool, but what's going on?
And then, okay, so in Bridget Lundy Payne's monologue, she mentions that she paid some guy to bury her alive. What do you think that means? Do you think that like that happened in actuality, or is that supposed to be an allusion to something?
That's another thing I have no clue about. That's why I'm saying I'm sure I missed a lot of things about the movie.
Okay. After the 20-year time jump, he gets that TV, a brand new flat screen TV delivered to him, and he says that he does have a family now. Do you think that's actual? Do you think that's true? It shows him kind of after that, like around a campfire by himself, but I'm not sure. Like, do you think he actually did, or is he lying to us?
I wouldn't be surprised if he really had a family and kids and all. I wouldn't be surprised because he grew up. But that's following my thought process that I thought he was moving on and she wasn't. So I don't know. You raise a very interesting question, but I do think he has kids because he grew up. He is on another state of his life.
But okay. But he's asked, like, what's your sexuality? Like, she says on the bleachers, I prefer females, I'm a lesbian. what about you? And he's like, I like TV. So do you think he married a woman? Do you think he married a man? What's his family?
Maybe he has a family that like his wife or whatever. Maybe. Oh, I see where you're getting at. I That makes me question now. So maybe his family is actually fake.
I have no clue. It's somewhat ambiguous, and they're trying to. So, she said that she was trying to make this film like the way that you remember a dream, and I don't think that there's enough there to make the story kind of work on its own. So, like the freak out thing. Do you think he actually freaked out at the end? Was that something that actually happened, or is it showing us like a point of view from inside of his head? Like nobody reacted to it at all. Did that actually happen, or is that just a depiction of like what's going on in his head, or what?
I think that's what's going on in his head.
So then the box cutter thing, like why the box cutter? Why did he have to actually look inside of himself, not just metaphorically look inside of himself?
This I don't know.
And then the whole apology after that. Again, nobody seems to actually be understanding. Nobody seems to actually acknowledge anything that he's saying. He's just apologizing to everyone. That also leaves so much ambiguous. That's like, did any of that actually happen? Is it like a metaphor to you're apologetic for what you truly are? It seems so ambiguous, but not in a way that like works for me. It feels like it's trying to make the audience do the writing for you, and I don't know. It doesn't come off as something that I'd like to actually explore or put too much more thought into. I feel like I put way too much into it. Initially, it was frustration of like, what the hell? I was told this is a horror movie, and like the only thing close to it is like the effect it's having on like my frustration. Like, why would you recommend this to me? So I don't know. I like ambiguity in interpretation. I like ambiguity in an ending, but it seems like you have to have a cohesive story first, and I don't feel like this does. I feel like on the surface level, this doesn't work for me. Allegories are very strong in this, and I understand what they're trying to do. It just doesn't feel like it landed. To me, it feels like the execution wasn't quite there. It sounds like the concepts really could be great, but man, for me, they fell short. For me, if I'm going to judge a film, it has to be on a bunch of different levels. So one of which is storytelling. So it would be plot, character development, theme. I'd be hard pressed to tell you what exactly the plot of this is. In almost every other film that we've talked about, I could give you like a rough thumbnail of it, but in this, I'm really hard pressed to do that. I don't feel like these characters develop. I didn't come up with that same message that you did, Multi, that Justice Smith Owen is actually growing up. It's like, no, I got the impression that he's the exact same character, that he's just, okay, now it's 20 years later, but I'm still the same monotone guy. I don't know. I didn't get that was different. Another thing that I'd judge it on is acting. And I get it. These people are supposed to be under this Luna juice, but man, it is so not compelling. It's just very dull, very monotone, and just barely walking by, like sleepwalking through a film. And if that's the case, I mean, like it feels like you can have a character that's like that, but generally you kind of have the other characters a little bit more upbeat or something, but it feels like everybody in this world is just sleepwalking to me. The other thing is directing. It feels like there is a direction and there is a vision that this director has. And Jane Schoenbrunn, it sounds like she achieved what she was looking to do in this. And then the cinematography in this, it is gorgeous. I absolutely love it. The visuals are amazing. I love the way that they're doing lighting. Every time they're watching the Pink Opaque, just you can tell that the screen isn't actually showing pink. But man, when it shows them, just they're lit up so vividly with this pink that just is so vibrant. It looks amazing. And then when they actually show the show from back in the day, they're using these VHS effects on it that look so authentic and so good. Man, it really brings you back. And the same thing with a lot of the sound design that they're using for that. it sounds great. You kind of get that tape huzz. You kind of get that little bit of fuzz that's going on there. It's amazing. The VHS effects, the visual effects, the ones that are kind of like somebody's just like drawing on the screen, that kind of like, I don't know what you call it, the hybrid kind of animation, live action. That's awesome. And then they're using a whole bunch of 90s tropes that are really fun. The character is directly addressing the camera. It's very like Malcolm in the Middle, or a lot of those 90s shows that are doing that, and they're just literally talking to the camera. There's so many of those little things that they get right. Like you mentioned, the show that's in there, the Pink Opaque, that show, it looks fun. It looks like it is of the time. I keep getting offended that people are calling it Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm not even the hugest Buffy fan, but man, that thing is so many tiers above what this show is inside the show. But that seems so much more interesting than what we got.
It reminded me more of like sort of like low budget or mid budget stuff from like from like Fox, or
totally like Goosebumps, or Are You Afraid of the Dark, things like that.
Are You Afraid of the Dark, Erie, Indiana, those kinds of shows.
Yes, yeah, like that type of stuff. I loved like the artwork that they had in there. The drawings where they're kind of showing what the labels on the tapes were as he's walking down the hall. That whole visual thing is amazing. The chalk drawings that are outside, that's really amazing. I think the director had a vision on what she wanted in here, but just for me, the storytelling didn't work for the story overall. The character development doesn't seem like it's actually there. Like, when Maddie comes back, she's just standing there, like her arms to the side and like her legs kind of spread, just like standing there like a joke. And I'm not kidding. The first time I saw that, I started chuckling when she's just like standing there like a zombie or whatever. And I don't know, man. I just don't know that there's much character development. And then the whole fact that they set up in the beginning, like every episode has this thing where there's two bands that play, and then literally we get taken to that bar and there's two bands that play, and they play the entire song. So I guess one of the things that Jane Schoenbrunn did is she reached out to these two bands that she's really big fans of and said, hey, if you could write any song for this 90s TV show, go ahead and write it. And then they did. So they wrote it as if it is for the Pink Opaque. It's an interesting concept. I don't think we needed to watch two full performances of a band in the middle of a movie. That really took me out. That really stopped the pacing to me. They're fun songs. I think that could have been over some of this very slowness, and maybe that would even give an extra element of excitement to some of this dullness. But
I think it would have been better if it had been played in the background and maybe occasionally cut back from the characters talking to the band and then back to the characters talking.
Yeah. And I completely agree. Something like that would possibly give it a little bit more, energy as well. Because the stiff monotone delivery that Justice Smith has the entire time, man, it did not connect with me. That being said, I can identify with this character for a bunch of different reasons. Like, we've all felt like an outcast. We've all felt different, and we've all felt like we weren't being like true to ourselves. I think that's the thing. Like, the cinematography is really great and beautiful, and it's haunting. I am going to think about some of these scenes, like the one at the beginning with Ian Foreman, the young Owen, where he's under the, they used to call it like a parachute, but that weird thing where all the kids in the class kind of hold up the tarp thing. And I don't know what it is. They always called it a parachute, but they had a very specific one that is kind of the trans flag colors. And then there's this other beautiful shot where it is
another thing I didn't pick up on.
There's another beautiful one where Justice Smith is walking down this hall, and the windows are kind of alternating between pink or blue filters on them, and then there's some of them that are white. So you get like all those colors as he's walking down the hallway. Yeah.
One thing I did notice though, when he's walking down the hallway, there's like these posters on the wall with like these affirmation statements, like "Be true to yourself" and stuff like that. That I did pick up on, and that's why I thought this is played into what I thought was the allegory for homosexuality.
Well, but there was also some like kind of, I don't know what you'd call them, like action movie quotes, because there was also like pain is weakness leaving the body, and there was another quote on the wall too. I don't know. It just some of the set dressing seemed a little on the nose. Again, if it's supposed to be this Mr. Melancholy's world, I guess there's a reason why it's supposed to be on the nose. But yeah. So yeah, I think there is such an opportunity to present the like trans experience in an inviting and relatable way that has sort of universal experiences that, you know, even somebody who doesn't agree with this whole like trans whatever, even if they disagree with that, there is this whole universal experience of, you know, not being true to yourself. I feel like you could make it work on multiple levels and still have it be this allegory that totally works. But instead, it feels like they're going all in on this one particular interpretation. And if anybody online is saying that they don't like it, I've seen a whole bunch of like kind of replies to any of the letterboxed reviews, just calling them like bigots and everything, and just saying like it's not for you, and it is your. Now I can't remember. It's not exactly straight privilege, but essentially, like, because we live in this patriarchal society, you expect a certain thing. It is your heteronormativity that's demanding that this movie be this way instead of accepting what it is, which I think that's kind of a cop-out. You know, I think movies should be somewhat universal, but, you know, there's always going to be subjectivity.
I'm with you on that.
But yeah, it just feels like the way that they're going all in on this one interpretation, and that's the only way that it could be, is making it very niche, making the audience very niche at best, where, man, if you're just going like nostalgia or not being true to yourself, I feel like this could have hit so widely and it could have been so amazing. There's so many elements there that really could have worked. But to me, it just seems like it's a focus on symbolism over the surface level story, and the surface level story doesn't quite work. And if that doesn't quite work, it's a huge barrier to entry for most people. And yeah, just I get the whole thing that they're attempting to make it how you remember a dream, but man, it doesn't work for me. I do like some surreal things. One of my favorite movies is a Lynch movie, and then I've got problems with some of his other movies. I'm not a huge Twin Peaks fan, but sometimes the surreal can be just so amazing. But man, I have no desire to rewatch this. To tell you the truth, I was not looking forward to a second watch of this, but I did it, and I didn't fast forward as much as I wanted to. But I think 2 times is too much for me. It's not going to be like the lower end of my spectrum for the year. It's definitely not in my bottom 10. It's nowhere near the top 10. It just, to me, it's just a swing and a miss. I wish Jane Schoenbrunn, you know, the best with her third film. Actually, I've heard it might be a novel now, but this is. So she did one that's Let's Go to the World's Fair, and then this one is the second in her Screens trilogy. Supposedly it's going to be 3 stories, and the first one is kind of, I want to say it's understanding the trans identity, and then this one is that moment where you realize that you could be true to yourself, finding that true moment to yourself, and then the third one is going to be actually about transitioning. So I hope she's really successful with that third one. I heard that she might be turning that into a novel instead of a movie. But I got to say, this is a huge step up from that first one. Just visually, there is so much going on in this one, where the last one was a little bit more about being kind of like a webcam thing. So just this feels like way more of a movie than her first one. I'm sure her third one is going to be kind of amazing. But yeah, it did gross like $5 million worldwide. So I think that's pretty good. I know it got a ton of acclaims, and it was kind of the darling of Sundance. So yeah, I wish her nothing but success in the future. But I don't know. I'm not sure her films are for me.
I liked it a lot more than The Substance. I'm a
You're wrong.
firm defender of I saw the TV glue. Do you want to add more?
Just you are very wrong in that. There's a reason why there are awards being talked about, perhaps nominations for a couple of the actresses in that, and definitely for effects, and possibly for even score. But this one, I don't think we're hearing any nomination talk.
It's so
But
sad.
fair enough. Everything
The
is subjective.
underdog. The underdog. Do you want to add more, Gary?
I don't think so. I've probably spoken too much. I don't hate the
Never.
film by any means.
You never
but
speak too much.
I guess I was expecting something more out of it. It felt like a bit of a letdown to me.
But that's funny because when you explained you were sold off on a horror movie, I was sold off on a coming of age movie. So it's very different how they tried to sold you off the movie and how they tried to sold me off the movie. It's hilarious. Super Bowl, do you want to add something?
No, not honestly. Now I might have a different perspective on it because of the trans thing. So I might give it a second watch, just maybe to see if I pick up on more stuff. But
Yeah.
other than that, I don't think. After that, I don't think I would watch it again. I think it's a movie that maybe had great, like sort of like Ray was saying, movie that maybe had great ideas but poorly executed.
Interesting.
Yeah, like that being said, I didn't hate it though.
Okay. What would be your grade out of 10?
For me, this would be a 6.
What about you, Gray?
Yeah, I think I'd go somewhere around there. I think I'd go 6. And looking at IMDb, I guess they give it a 5.8. So we're not that far off.
And
I'm just as baffled as you that this was like some people describe this as a horror movie. I don't see that at all.
Me
Like
neither.
even when I was looking stuff up for this, I think even not IMDb, but Wikipedia describes that as a horror movie, and I think even people who really love this movie would agree that it's not a horror movie.
Yeah.
That again. That being said, maybe people who are trans might see it that way, just because I'm not a trans person myself. I'm a big supporter of trans rights, though. But I imagine, especially in the climate that they live in now in some parts of the states, maybe their everyday life is a horror movie, unfortunately.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think that's
a whole other can of worms. So
Yeah.
For sure.
I give this movie a 10 out of 10. Masterpiece. I like it.
There's no issues with this?
No, none. I was entertained. I was hooked. I had no issues with it. I'm jealous of you, Gray. You had the time to watch it twice. I think I will rewatch it once I hit my 100 movie mark. I'm at 75 now.
Since you said that Oh Brother Where Art Thou suffered from characterization, can you name 3 characters from this movie? If you can't name them, can you describe them?
The black kid and the lesbian girl.
Okay, that's 2 characters.
The parents were very authoritarian. Well, the parents? The black boy. And
actually, only when we got to the end credits did I realize his dad is Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit.
Yeah.
And
he hasn't aged well.
The dad of the girl is not really there, but he is there. He doesn't give a shit about his daughter.
And Super Bowl, you might remember it, but did you notice who Neighbor 1 and Neighbor 2 were? So it's Pete and Pete from Pete and Pete. I don't know if you remember that 90s Nick show, but
no.
For some reason,
where I lived, we didn't have Nickelodeon. I knew what it was.
Fair enough.
I knew what it was, but I lived in a small town and we had a really crappy cable, so there was a lot of channels we didn't get. And there's certain American channels that just weren't available in Canada, period. But I did know what Nickelodeon was, and some of their shows did air on some other channels in Canada, and I was able to watch them. But that one, I've heard the name, but I never watched it. I never watched Pete and Pete.
I would not recommend going back. It is one of those, like the Pink Opaque, where I went back and watched it, and it's like, oh yeah, this was a kid's show. Fair enough. It doesn't hold up to the nostalgia, but I do have a certain love for those 2 actors, and it was fun to watch them kind of come back. So they're just in that one scene where they're putting police tape up, and for some reason they're putting police tape up or on a street for a missing person, as if like there was a murder or like some crime. Like I don't know. I don't think you'd actually tape off a street.
No, I think that's more just visual shorthand that a lot of
Yeah.
movies use and overuse. Like the chalk
the neighbors
outline
will have
for
to stand out there.
yeah, like the
Peter
chalk
did
outline
one.
for a dead body. Apparently, they never did that in real life.
But it's so cool.
Yeah.
Man. So I've been making those on sidewalks for no reason. Okay, fair enough.
Well,
And we are back.
Yeah, RedBlue podcast. Come check the scene. Movies old and new. Know what I mean? The RedBlue podcast. Come check the scene. Movies old and new. Know what I mean?